Annie Lennox, welcome to the afternoon show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Do you know how lovely it is for a presenter to play something like that, blaring out, which makes me get very emotional just listening to the lyrics, let alone the way you sing it, and then you walk in the middle of it, which is fantastic.
Thank you. That's so kind.
The album is called Nostalgia. Just explain to everybody listening why you chose these particular tracks.
You know, the tracks that I had never thought of that I would ever record, and many of them were unknown to me as a child. I wasn't brought up listening to jazz, really. And not that this is particularly a jazz track. This is most of the tracks on Nostalgia from the 30s. And this track, I Put a Spell on You by Screaming Jay Hawkins, is actually from the mid-50s. But they kind of belong together somehow. And I just had a notion that it would be interesting to put my voice, if you like, into another genre and just to have fun exploring something different. It's like a challenge, and it was such a journey for me creating this album, Nostalgia, learning these songs. It was, like I say, songs that I didn't really know. I kind of knew a little bit, but to learn a song, you have to get very intimate with it. It has to be something that you actually live with for a long time, you know. And it's just been great.
Do you think that, without at the risk of getting really indulgent about this and over examining it, do you think that because of your life experience now, you see these songs in a completely different light? And the reason I ask this is when I was playing them and then playing interviews of you talking about them, I'd never really listened to the lyrics of that song before.
Right.
And you were saying, you know, you're a man-loving feminist, which is one of the phrases you said off the back of that track, it's the power of a woman, that a woman can have enormous power. And I was just listening to it then, and I drive around listening to this album. That's when I'm in my own world. And I trust you singing it because of where you come from. Do you understand?
I do understand that. It's so funny when you're a young person, you know, and you have all your life ahead of you. You don't know what that's going to be. It's like a big question mark, an unknown place. And then you're living it through your 20s and your 30s, and then you get up to your 40s, and maybe you start having kids in your mid-30s. Most women, that's when the clock starts to tick for them, you know. And I'm heading up for 60 now, so I have 6 decades of life behind me that I'm looking back on. And in a sense, yes, there's this personal nostalgia that I'm addressing in a way. And also the fact that, you know, and I wonder if you'll, and the listeners will kind of feel this as well. It's so interesting, like one's memory is so acute, and you're thinking, wow, you know, actually the 80s, 30 years ago, isn't it? Like the 50s, well, that's about, you know, so many years ago, and yet still, if you've been there, you have a memory of it.
I just want to butt in there because Anna Webb, who was presenting the dog item with me, her godfather is Bryan Adams, and she said she saw you in Vancouver when you were on stage with Bryan Adams, and that was 86, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is like one of the highlights of her music memories.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
But it's interesting what you chose as a single, because I just want the very first track, which I can't play, but once I'm allowed to, I will play it non-stop.
Right, it's not out yet.
It's not out.
No.
But can I just say, it's called Memphis in June, and I think it's really clever what you've done, because it starts with a piece of unnamed music that floats, and it really hooks you in, and it also sets the mood for the whole album. What is that piece of music?
That is a wonderful songwriter called Sammy Fain, who is singing this beautiful little piece of music. It's I'm trying to remember the title of it now, but it's something like "You made a new kind of love. You made a new kind of world or love to me." And it's what it is, basically. It's a man singing a very tender song about a woman and comparing her to flowers and bird song. And actually, the times that we live in these days are very hardcore, and you very, very rarely hear that kind of tenderness expressed, particularly from a man to a woman. And I find it so touching. And of course, looking back on the old days, I wasn't around in the 30s, but in my grandparents' day, it did seem that people's general behaviour in a way was more genteel, that they were more perhaps a little bit more considerate. Of course, it wasn't perfect, and there were a great deal of things that were happening then, you know, that like in between the First and Second World Wars that were very dark. People were living in terrible hardship and poverty and the Depression era and all of that. But just that sentiment, this notion that a man could be thoughtful and tender and show his feelings, you can hear that in the songs of the era.
And it's a very clever device, because you play that right at the start of the album, and then you play it at the end of that track as well, and it's so evocative, you know,
Yes.
the old 30s cracked record.
Yeah, that sound is so wonderful.
You then, Summertime, which again, I hadn't ever thought about the lyrics before, and you explain how, and I was talking to Robert Elms, the presenter who was on before me, about the lyrics of this, because I said, I've never sat and listened about, it's basically about a child born with a silver spoon, isn't it?
Yes, I would say so. I think that's absolutely right. And the irony of Summertime is that the nanny or the caretaker of the child who's singing this lullaby to the child is a woman who is in servitude and will never have any access to the kind of lifestyle that the baby will have. And so she's singing about how, you know, you'll set your wings and you'll fly, into freedom, as it were, into the future life when you grow up. But the nanny, the caretaker, will always be stuck in that place, and because of the conditions of being born in a certain place, and I think those issues are very contemporary issues, actually, still to this day. And I look back and it can't be sentimental with these songs, because actually it isn't a saccharine past. You know, the things that were troubling people then are still troubling us now, and we've got additional challenges because technology is changing our lifestyles all the time. We're trying to catch up. We're speeding up.
Is it, I mean, I'd love to know the tracks you rejected, the ones that you chose, and that this was your shortlist, obviously, and the ones that you rejected, and how many of those were, as you say, with a social comment behind them. There's another track. This is so frustrating for the people that don't have the album, but which is Strange Fruit, which is really very bleak and like a spiritual, isn't it?
Oh no, absolutely. Strange Fruit is really a legendary song, and an incredibly evocative song, because at the time when Billie Holiday recorded it, it was before the civil rights movement had been established in America. And so even the singing of a song like that as a kind of, I mean, absolutely, as it was a protest song, it was describing the lynchings that had taken place in the South, and it was objecting to them. And it's very, very powerful. And people didn't want to hear that kind of, that kind of record. And her own record company actually said, no, we're not going to, we don't want you to record it. They gave her a chance to record it with another independent label.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm just going to read out the first verse, and these make bleak reading, and when you hear them, they are so resonant. Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
Yes, that's right. And that theme, the theme of cruelty, man's inhumanity to man, violence. Violence is played out on a global scale on a daily basis, continuously, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be racism and bigotry and hatred, whether it be warfare or an attack, a random stabbing, or I don't know. It's such a strange aspect of humanity, and the darkest aspect of our shadow selves, if you like. And actually, I feel that Strange Fruit is the darkest track on the album, but so significant to put that balance in there.
And Annie, it's so significant for today, because I've said it quite a lot recently. The news at the moment is the bleakest I remember it in my years, and I've been I've lived as long as you, and it's really bleak, and that resonates. The lyrics of that really resonate with today. Absolutely. So what are we? It begs the question: are we able to evolve as a human species? Do we actually begin to change our behaviour? Will there ever be a solution? Will there ever be peace? And peace must start within oneself. Each individual must take responsibility to become a peace-loving person and to kind of stop the violence. The violence stops here. Isn't it interesting? Because nostalgia is such a soft title, and then when you dig deeper and you look at the tracks you've chosen, it goes far beyond that, the memories, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And interesting enough, I spend quite a lot of time in South Africa. And, I was transcribing the songs while I was there. And, if you live in certain places, you can be really close to, let's say, a township, a shanty town, where there are maybe 1 million people that live there. And there's tremendous violence and hardship that goes on daily. And, I'm always aware that this is happening and what can be done, and it's so challenging.
Do you get frustrated that people who have, I mean, you have enormous amount of power. A lot of so-called celebrities have a lot of power, but you really do, because people respect your thoughts. Do you get frustrated that people don't politicise their songs or their messages more?
There was a time back in the 80s when Amnesty International had their first tour, and they had artists like Peter Gabriel and Youssou N'Dour and Sting and Tracy Chapman coming on tour, and we had some incredible events going on where I did feel this connection to music, this platform of music was the perfect kind of partnership for issues that these wonderful organisations are dealing with and trying to make transformative change for years. And the fact of the matter is that actually all the charitable organisations are all looking for quote unquote celebrity or celebrities to represent them, and the media are saying, oh well, it's just a celebrity trying to find some extra attention through doing something like this. And it is a very strange kind of coalition, because I feel that if a person wants to bring raise a platform, raise awareness about a particular issue, I think that's a valid thing. But it depends on your motivation. If you want to really do it well and do it properly and thoroughly, then you need to understand what the issue is. You cannot just be arbitrarily choosing some issue and saying, okay, but then I say that, and yet again, the difference between a so-called celebrity being present during a fundraising event or
attention.
Not being there is massive.
I agree.
So it's very, very tricky place.
It's interesting though, because you are so private, and yet you use Facebook now, don't you? You seem to
for years.
Yes. So that's interesting, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it depends how you do it. You say I'm so private. I'm just like an ordinary person in that respect. I have a life, and I protect my life. I don't want to have people coming into my house and taking pictures of my house or personal things. I don't want to show off in that way. If I have things that are special, they're not to be shared for other people. There's a boundary around me. That's my personal choice. I love to blog on Facebook, but I'm very, very particular about how I do that. I would not, for example, try to sort of, how can I say it, sell myself on Facebook. And if I do something that's personal, it's in a particular way, so you really won't see, I won't reveal so much that it's not like Hello magazine or something like that,
But it's a way of keeping in touch with your fans, that they do find you accessible through Facebook.
It's so simple. I love communicating with people. I love taking pictures, so I'm constantly taking photographs, and I love making little comments. Sometimes they're just fun. Like yesterday, I blogged about soup because I was making soup, and I took a picture of it.
Pea soup.
Well, there you have it.
Honestly,
why not?
I loved the picture of that. When I was
why wouldn't I want to share that?
I was talking about
that's personal, but not personal. If you see what I mean.
Pea soup. I'm so into summer minestrone, which is all green vegetables in a pea soup, which would be wonderful. I love all that. You also said, and in fact, you didn't. And I am going to ask you this because of the Scottish referendum. You knew I was probably going to ask you this. You didn't use social networking to try and influence people.
Oh, absolutely not.
Did you make a definite point of not doing that for your own sake or for the sake of the referendum?
Both, actually. For both. I felt that it would be inappropriate for me to try to muscle into a national issue. And when I say national, not just for Scotland, but for the whole of the United Kingdom. And there I am putting in my tuppence worth. So I always stated that I'm agnostic, I'm on the fence. And, I had my views, definitely have my views still. But I just didn't want to be one of those ones that kind of goes one side or the other.
You don't have to answer this. Were you happy with the result?
It's very interesting. It was hard for me over the years to visualise what it would be like to have an independent Scotland. I've lived in London for the last 40 years, and I have never experienced anybody being biased against me for being Scottish. I really don't like the sort of anti-English nationalism that has risen up. I find that really it makes me cringe. And as I say, I've lived very comfortably in England, where people have made me feel very welcome and are very open to me, the Scot, living within their midst. And I think it's time that we did get over this history of 300 years. At the same time, I understand the fervour that people feel. I think they're very frustrated with Westminster and they want to see change. The problem with the whole thing was, for me, that if you had voted for an independent Scotland and you got it and it didn't work out your way, there was no B plan. There is no turning back. You have to have it forever.
Yes.
And that is massive.
Yes. Can we also talk, I just want to ask you this as well. Gary Crowley, one of our presenters here, interviewed you a while ago, and he said, please ask Annie, does she still make music in her shed? Do you?
Which shed did I have?
don't know. I think it was a shed at the bottom of the garden.
Well,
he said your studio was at the bottom of your garden.
Yes, in fact, nostalgia was made in what used to... Well, I said shed euphemistically, and it wasn't my shed. Mike Stevens, who is the producer of my dear friend, who I've worked with over the years, he had a garage that was converted to a studio at the bottom of his garden. It's very small, and I said shed because I'm very comfortable in small, low-tech places.
And now I've quoted you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or misquoted you.
Doesn't matter.
We do quite a few interviews on this radio station for various artists, and I was also interested to read that you said the pool of music, and I agree with this, actually is oversubscribed. Does that put the onus on you then to really, this album has been quite a long time coming, so do you really think before you release a new album?
I think when you make music, the best part of it for me is being in the studio and being creative. I absolutely love that. And I also like to talk about it. So I'm very, very grateful to be here and to have the opportunity to give interviews and to describe what the thinking behind it. It's wonderful. So I would just say, I just love music, and it's always been a bit of a risky business. You never know if people will love it or hate it, but that's fine. I'm doing what I love, and I'm grateful to be here.
This album is amazing, and I can't wait for everyone to hear all the tracks that we've actually been talking about, because it must be very frustrating for them. But I Put a Spell on You is out now. When is the album out?
27th of October.
Annie, my final question, do you have a dog?
I have a virtual dog. It's not my dog, it's someone else's dog, and I think it's better for the dog that it's my virtual dog.
That'll do me.